Hello, so patch 14.5 just came out today, and I'm going to give you some comps that can help you in your ranked journey a little bit. Before we get into the comps, there's a couple things I want to note. First of all, make sure to like and subscribe. More guides are coming later in the week. I did a couple VOD reviews earlier this week, but we're going to go through item guides as well as general ranked climbing guides, like tips for each rank. So if you're looking forward to that content, make sure to like and subscribe because it does help me out. And this is a channel where I usually do TFT guides to try and improve your set 14 experience as much as possible. Next, let's go back. Before we actually talk about the comps, two things I want to say. So there was a lot of reworks with some of the items. We talked about those in some of the previous videos on my channel. I did like a guide, the patch notes review and stuff like that. But of the item reworks, two of them are a little bit outstanding right now as being exceptionally good or a little bit overtuned possibly. So the first one is Kraken's Fury. So this takes the place of Runan's Hurricane, and now instead of having the Runan's Hurricane effect, it instead makes the item that gives you 3% stacking attack damage. This item's really good right now. It still shows as a Runan's. My apologies, that's just the website that I'm using. But either way, make it as a Runan's component, and it's really good on lots of units that love to have attack speed as well. So think like your Rapid Fires, your Kog'Maws, people like Aphelios and Urgot, right? Lots of these type of units actually make great use of it, and it seems a little bit overtuned. It seems like a very powerful item at all stages in the game. Really good early game, really good to late game. So if you're looking for items to slam, this might be a really good one if you're playing around AD. Additionally, the other item that I think is doing a little bit better than expected or a little bit stronger is Sterix. I think Sterix is a little bit overtuned, the rework. Basically, it gives a lot of AD, a lot of HP, and then at 60% health, it gives you this huge health shield. So just be aware of that. If you're playing around melee style comps, Sterix might find its place in those comps a little bit more frequently. Just wanted to make those two outstanding notes. The other items don't seem super crazy relative to what they were, but there were some other item reworks that you can check out in patch notes or my reviews and stuff like that. Now let's actually talk about the comps. So we're going to start with the non-reroll comps, and of course there's always going to be me talking about the bread and butter. If you're trying to just play a call it a day AD style comp where you're playing around AD items, the little orange stat, Vanguard Marksman 4/4, very boring, very bland, same since the beginning of the set. It's still there, it's still good. This is a board that's complete on level 8, it's relatively strong, and basically what you're doing is you're going for Leona, try and build big Leona items, like Giga Tank items ideally. She's going to be your main tank, and she's going to tank a lot. She got a little bit nerfed, but the comp still seems completely fine. It seems not super consequential. She just might be a little bit less stable on 1 star. When you think about items for her, Anima squad is going to be active in this comp, so she's going to get a little bit of armor and MR. HP can go a long way, but just think Giga Tank items. As much armor, as much HP, as much of those things as possible. She gets some durability from her ability, so you can forego that a little bit and just go for like the raw number stats to boost. Now, in terms of our units in the background, there is a little bit of an item change going on here. We just kind of alluded to it before. Aphelios loves to auto-attack. Auto-attacking is his thing, and he can ramp up and do a lot of damage. Guinsoo is still good on him. They reworked Guinsoo a little bit, but doesn't seem like too much of a difference to the way Aphelios works, so Guinsoo is a must. And then Kraken's Fury, it shows as Runan's here, but it's going to be the Kraken's Fury in-game. It is very strong now. He just gets so much AD. You might look at it and think like, okay, well, Marksman gets a bunch of AD, so do we really need the extra AD on the Aphelios? And the thing is that Kraken's Fury just gives so much extra AD, and with Marksman you get so much AD, you don't even care about the other stats. You just, he seems to like ramp up just fine with it, and it just does insane amounts of damage where he's like still doing massive amounts. So really good itemization there, and it's synergized really well with his kit. And then the last item, you can either go for more damage, you can try and scale that AD, put like crit or damage amp, right? You can use your Giant Slayer, you can use your Guard Breaker or Striker's Flail now, but it's a little bit worse because it requires some critical strike, so wouldn't recommend it on its own. You can put an IE, or you can even put a Gunblade. Gunblade works really well, just allows him to heal up a lot of the units on the board, makes him less susceptible to getting sniped in the back line. Just really good itemization there. Xayah is like the one-shot goat. She's just gonna like absolutely like delete anybody that she comes across. So what you're trying to do is just take the scaling Marksman AD. She's not a big auto attacker, so Kraken's Fury isn't going to be super great on her, but it's still okay. It's not going to be like broken. Her, you would like to just stack crit items, right? Even IE and Last Whisper works really nicely. And then Striker's Flail, Guard Breaker, it's now reworked. It's called Striker's Flail. It gives the damage amp for getting critical hits, so you just want to ramp up that critical hit and then make sure that when she ults, she has 100% crit chance and massive crit damage, and then she just one-shots. So this comp works really well. You have your unit that does like the tank busting, just like eliminates a unit, and then as the fight scales, Aphelios will get to a point of critical mass and then clean up shop and like win the game for you. Additionally, with this comp, it is complete on level 8. You can level up to play any of the 5 costs, right? You can play a Garen, Aurora, Zac. These are just to name a few that are pretty easy to fit into this comp. One of them works really nicely. A lot of times you end up playing Aurora, then you can drop Silas and play a different unit as a Vanguard, just because you're going to have 3 Anima anyways. Garen can scale you and Zac can scale you into late game. It can actually give you a win condition, because if you scale up the Zac enough, then you can transfer items, and you know, Zac to 50 blobs is going to 1v9 and just win the game for you. Additionally, if you're stuck in a spot where you're stuck on level 8 and you have to roll really aggressively, this comp's really good at clutching out like, you know, top 2s, top 3s, maybe not game winning, but you know, you can even go for a Jinx 3. And Jinx 3 is just another way that people are trying to cap this board out by just not having to spend too much gold on pushing levels. But anyways, that's the first board. Next board that we're going to talk about, Street Demons. So Street Demon, like, is similar to Vanguard Marksman. It's been around for a while now. I think Street Demons is actually really strong right now because of Ziggs buffs, which we'll talk about in a second. But basically what you're trying to do with this board is play around 7 Street Demon. You have a extra Street Demon unit in the form of Rengar, so you can play Rengar until you hit a Samira, but then your high cap is going to be around Samira. When you're playing this board, you're typically playing Street Demon with Strategist because it's kind of intertwined as the synergy, and you also get Techie in for free with Zyra. As your high cap, Kabuko works really nicely with the Ziggs, Strategist, and then you also activate Bruiser for your whole board. Nico, similar to Leona, you just want to put like Giga Tank items. Think like your lots of armor, lots of MR, lots of HP. Those work really well. She also gets an insane amount of durability from Strategist, so she's going to be fine on that regard. So typically just try and get those raw numbers up as much as you can. Additionally, you're going to have your brand. So Guard Breaker got reworked, but I still think it's good item pairings. A lot of times with brand, you just want him to crit so that when he drops his nuke, he just like eliminates the whole board or kills a lot of units when he drops his big ult, right? So you have the AP that you're getting, you have some damage amp that you're getting from the traits, right? The Techie and the Strategist. So having the crit really ties that together to make those first couple casts extremely powerful and extremely strong. So Jewel Gauntlet works really nicely. Usually when you have Jewel Gauntlet, you want to pair up with another Crit Glove item to kind of scale that up effectively. So Strikers works really well. It gives you some extra damage amp, and then it also gives you some critical strike chance. So when they changed Guard Breaker to Striker's Flail, it kind of feels like it's a worse item on Brand, because Brand hit like AoE. He was really good at proccing the Guard Breaker effect, and then he also benefited from it previously giving a little bit of AP as well. Like it's just something that we lost as it got changed to Striker's Flail. I still think it's a good item though in this case, because you still want to scale up that critical strike chance to make sure that the Brand ult is critting, just to make sure that your damage output is fine. So we'll see. This last item, it is possible that we just change it out for something else, like a Rabadon's. I don't think Archangels is good here, because I don't think this comp can stall long enough for the Brand to scale the Archangels to a point where he's like, you know, it's better than just having like, you know, other items there. But like Rabadon's or some upfront AP might also help, and some upfront crit maybe from augments can make it that you can play something else in that place. Ziggs, a lot of times Ziggs was kind of like this awkward unit that you sometimes itemized, sometimes didn't itemize. Ziggs got buffed, basically like he was bugged, and now he's like bug fixed. I'm telling you guys now, I'm not sure if this is the optimal Ziggs board, but this board with a Ziggs 2 that has items, this Ziggs is a demon now. He used to be a joke. He used to just be like, you put utility on him and he sometimes helped clear up with the Brand. This Ziggs now is a monster. So you can actually main carry Ziggs with this comp pretty effectively, and you can just put similar AP style builds on him. He has a lot of damage amp from Strategist, and you might even be able to play other variations which play deeper into Strategist. So just be aware that Ziggs is a lot better right now. Trust me, this unit is a demon. Be ready for it, and I'll also talk about some variations where you might play around the Ziggs more so than you play around the Brand. Items would be similar to the brand, by the way. Just pair up with some crit. You can just transfer them over to the Ziggs, or you can build with whatever remaining components you have and itemize whoever is doing more damage. And then obviously your high cap is Samira. Before you hit Samira, you can itemize the Jinx with the Samira items, but here is just your outlet for AD items that you might not have a place for. Things like your sword items, pairing it with a lot of crit like IE will work really well. And then the Samira can just dive in and do a bunch of damage. Sometimes you'll see people put Edge of Night on Samira as well. It can sometimes work. If you have a Samira once, you might actually die early, so you can put some, like, you know, survivability style items on her. But a lot of times when you have Samira 2, it's totally fine. Just build her for like full damage, and she'll just like one-shot backlines pretty convincingly. There was also a buff to Techie. So when we're talking about brand and this line, I just want to show you two variations. I still think this is the most reliable and consistent way to play around AP. Generally this set, like, I think that it doesn't have that many conditions. Items works out really well. And now, especially because Ziggs is really strong, you actually have multiple avenues of having some stability in order to cap your board late game. If you need to, though, there is a like fast 9 or emblem dependent kind of comp that's the Techie variation, where you just play around vertical Techie. Techie got buffed again, and it's starting to get to that point where 6 and 8 Techie are becoming like almost like, you know, they're gonna work as a comp. I still don't think it's quite there yet. I think it's a little bit risky, because if you're gonna play this variation, the key things that you have to hit for your front line and your back line are very similar to this one, but it's a lot less expensive and a lot less temperamental. So I think that the Street Demon variation is gonna be a lot more stable. But if you find yourself with a Techie emblem, you can actually cap extremely high playing this 8 Techie variation. Obviously items would be very similar. You have a bunch of AP, so you want that damage amp and the critical strike on the brand, and he's going to be your main unit that you're going to try and do damage with. Also, if you're playing this variation, Viego, usually an Edge of Night works really well on him because he dives into the backline, so you just don't want him to die instantly. And then you can pair him with like that classic AP melee style build, pair up your glove items, Hodge, JG, and then this Viego can actually go nuts. Of course, I think this is more of like a very situational high roll, like you have 8 Techie. I wouldn't necessarily angle this right away. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it comes out that this is like a broken comp, but I would be very cautious about it, right? Just be careful out there and try it out if you really want to. But I know, at least for me, I'm not going to try it out until I see a couple other people in my lobby trying it out, because I don't think this one is the consistent variation. Something that I do think is a little bit interesting, though, is now that Ziggs is really strong, Strategist Amp used to be like a very fast 9 aggressive style of comp that you really wanted to, like, you know, take Econ Augment, make it to level 9. Amp got a little bit, like, you know, whoop, it got a little bit nerfed, so it's not as strong. It's a little bit more temperamental, especially if you don't hit like the Nico 2 to help stabilize your front line, because a lot of these Amp units that you were using, like Nefiri and Nidalee, just to, like, you know, take up space, now have less HP, so it's a little bit awkward. This might be a go-to Ziggs carry comp. Similarly to the brand, just like, you know, you're putting those crit items because you have the huge amount of damage amp on him. I'm not sure yet if you want to play this and go like for Ziggs carry with a setup like this, but it's just something to note. I think Ziggs is doing really well right now. I think the fixes that they did to him have made him really strong, so this might also be an option for you if you're in like a high roll spot and you can stabilize around the Ziggs and then push the level for the deeper amp and the deeper strategist when you make it to level 9. Finally, this is the third comp. So I know I kind of showed a bunch of comps, but I did want to just talk about brand and Ziggs a little bit more openly, because I think that there was a lot to talk about there. The third comp that I think is really consistent is Anima Squad. Now, this one might come as a bit of a difference. I think all the comps, the last pick here, like, I wanted to give you guys one really good AD comp that's super consistent, one really good AP comp that's super consistent. Right now, it's like, I feel like every comp has a lot of great situational spots that you can play them in, right? I think with the Kraken's Fury, like vertical rapid fire with Zeri can be really good. They buffed Exotech. Exotech can be really good. There's Exotech with MF. There's MF Dynamo, which we might talk about a little bit later in reroll. There's Vex still, like Vex with Sejuani, that's still pretty good. There's also like Fast 9 Boombot. There's Fast 9 Amp. There's so many different comps, and they all kind of have like similar conditions of either having a lot of HP or having a lot of gold to guarantee your stabilization points, or your items have to work out in such a way that are great. Like a lot of the Exotech and rapid fire lines work a lot better if you have good Exotech items, if you're building around that core, for example. One of the lesser I've been putting a lot of units here by accident, but one of the comps that has less conditions is Anima. And personally, I checked my own stats for this one because I was really curious because I've been playing a lot of different comps. Anima is the comp that I think I have gained the most LP with, so I thought it was deserving of a spot here because I'm putting my money where my mouth is. When I need something to play as a secure, safe kind of comp, I play a lot of Anima Squad, and it has not a lot of nuance, but it has some nuance to it that makes it really fun in my opinion, and it makes it really reliable. So here, similar to Vanguard Marksman, you're just playing Vanguards that's built in with the Anima, except you're playing deep into the Anima Squad trait. So what do you get for this? You get a lot more armor and MR, and you get some more durability. So the armor and MR makes it so your whole team has a lot of tankiness, and then, sorry, not durability, you get damage amp. So the damage amp also helps your units do a lot more oomph in their attacks. Additionally, you get to pick the Anima weapons that can help scale you really well, because the Anima weapon itself is going to do a lot of damage. So with 7 Anima, you get 3 weapons, and they're all really good if you just pick ones that fit well with your team. When you're playing this comp, you're getting more armor and MR because you're playing deep into Anima. So I typically try and put HP items on this Leona in order to make her really effective as a frontline unit. Now, when you're working on your backline items, there's actually a lot of different things that you can build towards. A lot of times, I end up building a board that looks something like this. And I usually drop the Vayne when I'm playing 7 Anima. I think Yuumi is really good at spreading damage until you have an Aurora, and Techie is really good to activate if you can find a Techie later in the game. A lot of times you're building around AD items, however, and the AD items. Similarly, Xayah's, she's the one-shot queen, you can call her whatever you want. In my head, I always look at her, I'm like, yeah, she's going to delete whoever she comes across. With a lot of crit, just give her the crit items, i.e., Last Whisper, and then a lot of times the new Striker's Flail or previous Guard Breaker. Just get that crit strike chance up so that her ult is always critting, and then she has the damage amp anyways from the trait, and she has some extra 80 that she's getting from Marksman. It's just a really well-rounded, I'm just gonna nuke a unit, and she just like pops off and like does a bunch of damage. You can activate Marksman and Dynamo by playing a Jhin, so whenever you're playing this comp, make sure to just hold on to a Jhin. It actually works out pretty well. Sometimes you can drop the Jhin and play a 5 cost if you have a 5 cost, because the Xayah is going to do so much damage anyways that the fight's often over before you get super deep into like Marksman, if that makes sense. So like you can work both of them, but like it can work with both of them, like with or without Marksman, this comp. But typically if you're trying to stabilize, the Xayah with the Marksman is going to be the way to go. With Aurora, a lot of times she has really good spread, so making backline utility items like anti-heal, like Morello or Red Buff, will work really well on the Aurora. Additionally, you can also put your AP items on the Aurora because she detaches herself from the fight. She's often living for majority of the fight, so Archangels gets a lot of value. But if you don't want to do Archangels, you can go similarly with like really high AP damage style items. Aurora 2 is also buffed, so this comp can actually cap really high around the Aurora. Another thing to note about this comp, this is where some of the nuance comes into play. What I think makes this comp really consistent, at least when I play it, is the fact that you have multiple options to cap out the board with 5 costs. So you can easily fit in, a frontline 5 cost. You can easily fit in like a Viego to activate Techie, and you can also fit in a Renekton pretty nicely that can give you Bastion. So you can push levels, activate these 5 costs, which helps you to cap pretty high with the board. Additionally, if you're stuck at a point where you can't push levels, you can actually benefit from rolling really deep at a low level. Anima Squad, the weapons actually scale with the star level of your unit. So if you hit a 3-star unit, your Anima Squad weapons are going to start to do more damage. A lot of times I might find myself in a bad spot, not hitting my full board, not having a lot of HP, and I can clutch out a top 4 because I just like keep rolling and I hit like 3-star of some sort of the Anima unit on level 8. Now, it's not necessarily a recommendation. I think you're going to be stronger pushing levels, going to level 9, getting in an extra legendary, and having that unit upgraded. But in a lot of cases, I'll just have like a random Yuumi 3, a random Seraphine 3 that I pick up along the way, or even a random Alawi 3, and it actually helps me to stabilize by them doing more on the board being a 3-star, but also scaling up the Anima Squad weapon. So it's actually kind of worth, and if you're in a bad spot where you can't really make it to level 9, you can actually clutch out a couple fights by just having some extra damage on board through Anima. So I think it's a pretty consistent comp, so it's going to be my number 3. They're not really ranked, but it's going to be up there as one of the 3 that I would recommend if I'm recommending a top 3. Next now, we're going to go through the reroll comps. So the first reroll comp is not going to be too much of a surprise. Obviously going to be Bastion Morgana. So Bastion Morgana, I didn't think it was super crazy. I thought it was like pretty good last patch. I think it got like a little bit better towards the end of the patch as people like began to optimize it a little bit better in terms of like itemizations and stuff like that. It did get a little bit of a nerf, so I think this comp isn't like you instantly queue into the game and hard force it, so to speak. I think it's more so like if you have a spot for it, it's pretty reliable to play around. So what's the nuance? What's the way to play it? Well, typically you're like, obviously your high cap board is to just play 6 Bastion, 4 Dynamo. You're playing around Morgana as a main carry. Obviously this is a comp that would fit in on level 10. If you're not level 10 in your previous levels, then you just would play a board that looks something more like this, right? Obviously, you're playing 6 Bastion. Exotech fits in really easily. If your Exotech item is a frontline item, you can play Jhin. If you don't have a frontline Exotech item, then a lot of the times you can just play one of the other Dynamo units that's just going to do more damage, right? Either Elise or Aurora. You should almost always play Aurora, by the way, even if your Exotech item is good. But I'm just saying, like, in general, the other units would be a little bit more better than just playing Exotech if your Exotech item isn't particularly great. But a lot of times your board looks something like this. What you're rolling for, Jax 3, it's pretty good. Poppy 3, essential. And Morgana 3, essential. This Poppy is really key in this comp, which we'll talk about in a second. A lot of times people hyper focus on just Morgana. I guarantee you the Poppy is very important. In my opinion, I think Poppy is maybe even more important than the Morgana 3 in this comp. But we'll talk about that in a second. With Morgana, you always want to have blue buff. She's a low mana threshold unit, so blue buff is going to be really effective on her. And then because you have this like really strong front line, you're kind of playing a long-term like stally kind of comp. Gunblade works really well here, and then Morgana will just heal up a lot of the front line as well as heal up herself in case she gets sniped by anybody. It works really well. And then last item, usually you're going for like a big damage item. I don't think Guardbreaker used to be like a go-to because it worked really well because she hits all the units, so she has like the AoE effect and she would proc the Guardbreaker effect. Now that it's Striker's Flail, I don't think it's as good because like the critical strike on the ult isn't really gonna happen. Like the critical strikes and stuff isn't gonna work out too well. Maybe it is still okay, but I just think that it's not as good as just putting like a full damage item on her. So like, a Jewel Gauntlet or something else. Also, sorry, Guardbreaker was okay on her. It wasn't super great. It was only good if you had like a crit strike ability. Excuse me. I misspoke a little bit. I'm confusing my notes with Vex because the items look so similar. But usually in the past, you would just make like a Jewel Gauntlet, or you would make a Rabadon's if you are so high roll that you have it. Sometimes you can put on Archangels, but I think that the upfront damage is a little bit more important because you just want to try and delete units as soon as possible. Something that's really important to note, a lot of times in the, like, I'm going through these and I just say like, build whatever tank items you can, because like a lot of times they're like, okay. Poppy, tank items actually matter quite a bit here. Poppy is a demon. So if you read Poppy's effect, you might not even know this if you don't play this comp a lot. But Poppy does this thing where she throws a buckler, it says, at the furthest enemy, dealing magic damage that scales off of her armor. Strictly her armor, not her magic resist, just her armor and her AP. This Poppy unit, because you have Bastion in, she gets a lot of armor. Straight up, she just gets a lot of armor. This Poppy unit is a monster. If you put this Poppy on a similar side as the opponent's carry, right, such that she's targeting 4 hexes away. Let me go full board so I can show you what I mean. A lot of times it looks like, you might look at it and think like, oh yeah, like Morgana, like, she's so broken, This Poppy unit, I shit you not, she one-shots everybody. Like, if you put your Poppy here and 1, 2, 3, 4, she's able to target this, she can literally one-shot so many times, because between the passive damage that Morgana is doing, every time this Poppy casts, she just deletes a backline unit. It is so frustrating. If you're playing against this comp, your number one priority should be to dodge the Poppy. Like, you just have to get the fuck away from this Poppy, because this Poppy scams so many goddamn fights, it tilts the shit out of me. But this is the key to this comp. You gotta put this Poppy on the same side as your enemy carry, because this Poppy will just throw this, whatever this buckler is, I don't know what it is, right? I've never heard this word before, but this buckler, like, it deletes backline units. And it's really important to note that. So when you want to build your Poppy, a lot of times the best items on her are going to be those really good chainmail items, which is really funny because chainmail items are usually shit. Like, nobody ever wants a chainmail. It's like one of the least popular components. But like, if you could get a bramble vest on this Poppy just to scale up that buckler damage, she just absolutely nukes. Other things that are really good, like Protector's Vow, there's quite a few of them that you can actually just put on her in addition to your other items. So of course you're gonna want HP on her because she has a lot of armor from Bastion, but try and focus one decent chainmail item, right? Not just like a random thing. So one or two chainmail items and then HP, right? And lots of HP, because she's already going to have a lot of resistances because of Bastion. So just to scale that up. But just like, you know, even like I've seen like people with like the Bramble Vest augment playing Poppy from like mid game to late game and just streaking off of it. It's so important to note that, and just note, it's not like, you know, you want to build up her armor and her magic resist. Like, you do want to build up both of them, obviously, so she's like actually a tank. But like, just having like one solid item like Protector's Vow, for example, is just so great, because like it gives her a little bit more armor, and then also like helps her to cast earlier. This Poppy is really essential to the comp. Now you could play it without the Poppy, and you could do other stuff, of course, but I just want to point that out there as something that, like, you know, I see people sometimes do and sometimes don't do, and what I think is really important there. Next thing we're going to talk about here is Dynamo Vanguard. So this is a comp that you can play on level 8 as well, just like playing around Dynamo Vanguard MF carry. But this is like a variation which I think is really strong around Elise Braum reroll. So basically, reroll the units. You basically would push levels for 4 Vanguard. Until then, you would just play 2 Vanguard, 2 Bruiser, or something along those lines. But typically 4 Vanguard is going to work really well. Your Braum, you just want Giga items on him. He has a lot of shielding effects which work really well, and he also has really good scaling off armor and MR, so you can even make him with like Gargoyle solo frontline in some cases, but generally recommended just build him as tanky as possible. But Elise, a lot of times you want to have blue buff. Blue buff's going to work really well, and then you can go for full upfront damage, which is just going to be like your crit build, which is very similar to some of the other ones. You can also go for more scaling, and you can go for like Gunblade Archangels, for example, and just like try and infinitely stall, and there's just like one shot later in the match. And then you have your other dynamos that you can play around. A lot of times when you're playing this comp, you're dual carry around MF. If you think that you don't have enough front line, you could syndicate your front line. I usually syndicate Braum in this matchup, just because I think that it just helps out the front line tremendously. But if I have a Leona 2 and I don't have a Braum 3, then I'm 100% going to be going for the Misfortune hat on her with the syndicate bonus. But you can kind of look at your matchups and think to yourself, if I think that I need more like frontline busting abilities, then you can just go for the extra bullets on the MF as well. With her, a lot of times it's just full crit, works really well. So you can just go for the full crit build. Until you have Aurora, you can also play Jhin, because you have the extra room for Dynamo. But I think this comp's really good. I think this is like the I would say of the 3 cost rerolls, I think this one is the I don't want to say only one, but it's like one of the few that I think is really strong. And it also works really well as a level 8 comp, where you just like keep rolling. If you have something like Rigged Shop, I really like level 8 Dynamo Rigged Shop and just go for the Elise 3 Braum while I'm rolling for all my other higher cost units. That's another option as well. So just keep that in mind. Finally, similar to that comp, there is another variation, which obviously you can play around Dynamo with Elise. I think this Dynamo variation is extremely strong. Until you hit all your Dynamo units, you could play deeper into Exotech as well. For example, like in your early game, you can play Jhin in place of some of the other Dynamos, and you can also play a Mordekaiser, which works really well to activate Techie on the Shyvana. But of course, I think the strongest variation is going to just be to get to 4 Dynamo if your main carry Elise. And of course, she's really flexible. Just a lot of the time you want to have blue buff and then +2 items damage, either like scaling really deep into late game if you have a very stable front line, like your T-Hex is really tanky and your Shyvana's 3-starred with 3 items. But otherwise, I would just go for upfront damage, like just think like your burst down potential, because she can just do that. But with this version, you really have to start with early Nitro. If you don't have early Nitro, I would say just sell the Nitro units and go for this variation. Do you know what I mean? Right? Like if you start the game off, you have Elise, you say, okay, I'm going to play main carry Elise, I'm going to go for Elise 3. If you don't like high roll some of these units on level 7, or if you don't have a lot of Nitro stacks because you didn't get Nitro in that early, I would just sell the Nitro units, like give up, you know, don't worry about it. it's fine, and just play the Vanguard variation that's going to be a lot stronger and a lot more stable. But either way, that works really well. And additionally with Nitro, I just want to give another variation. Of course, if you have some of the conditions to make Nefiri really strong, Nidalee got buffed. So I think both Nitro versions with a Nidalee 3 is going to help you a lot in your early game to late game. But you can also play this Nitro variation where it's Exotech with Amp, and then you can play deeper into the Amp line later on. Basically, if you have some of the Nefiri win conditions like Spectral Cutlass, or some of the other Ornn artifacts that are really good, I think Silvermere Dawn and some of the other ones are fine. Those melee style damage ones, but usually it's Spectral Cutlass, like Spectral Cutlass, Pulse Stabilizer as your Exotech item, right? This is a good spot where you can play this type of reroll on level 6, hit everybody 3-starred, scale up the Dino, and then push some of the future levels for some Amp. This is another Nitro variation that you can go for, just to let you guys know. So anyways, those are the comps that I want to talk about. Of course, there's lots of other comps, even rerolls that are really strong, right? There's the Mundo Techie line that's extremely powerful. There's lots of the hero augments that have their place. There's even Bruiser Fiddlesticks if you have that type of setup. But just in general, I think these are comps that I've been playing a lot in order to help me climb, and that I believe strongly in just being very consistent, or a little bit, because that's usually what I favor when I'm trying to give recommendations for starting out players or people that are starting out with the patch. But like I said, almost every comp is playable if you see some of the comps that I talk about, or if you see some of the other things like, you know, that are more conditional, like Boombots, for example, with a Boombot emblem, Rapid Fire and Rapid Fire Renekton with a Rapid Fire emblem. A lot of this frying pan things that I talked about last patch are also still relevant, right? Bastion emblem on Morgana, even though it got nerfed, is extremely strong, gives a lot of AP. You know, even marksman emblem on like something like an MF is extremely strong, and like a Vanguard marksman with 2 Dynamo, and you replace one of the marksmans. Lots and lots and lots of interesting and cool comps that you can play. But these are some of the ones that are a little bit less conditional that you could have some success with. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and see ya. Bye-bye.